So good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out on a wintry night. As part of the village government works, we'll be beginning to work on our village budget, and we have some budget meetings coming up in March, and our final budget has to be in place by May 1st. And during budget time, we always hear a lot from residents concerning assessments that go up, the village tax rates, and the way we spend our money and maintain and work our village and provide for our residents and things. So myself and the village board felt that it was a good idea to invite the town assessor here, who is responsible for assessing our properties, to kind of give an explanation about his work and how he goes about doing his work, and then he's going to be willing to take questions and answer them following. His name is Patrick Duffy, and I turn the meeting over to him now to give us a little presentation.
As the mayor said, I'm Pat Duffy. I will be. I hear Frank Sinatra going through my head right now. As I said, I'm Pat Duffy. I will be your tour guide for tonight. There's a lot of misconceptions. First off, starts with the title. I am the town assessor. I am not the tax assessor. I do not assess taxes. I don't collect taxes, and the only taxes I care about are my own taxes on my house. There's not a single tax assessor in all of New York State. It's a common misnomer, and I'm going to show you what an assessor is. We're going to talk about that as we move along. So this is the agenda for the next 5 hours. No dose is available up here in the front. That's pretty much self-explanatory. I don't have to sit here and read it to you. So let's get started here. I'm not only the assessor here in the town of Manlius for the town, but I'm also technically the assessor for the 3 villages as well. Villages used to have their own assessor. And it was interesting because the village assessor would come up with the assessments for properties within the village, and the assessor for the town would also have to come up with assessments for the properties in the village. And a lot of times those two numbers didn't really correspond with each other. So over a period of time, the villages have given up their assessing unit status and turned it over to the town. So I wear 3 hats right now: the town outside of the villages and the 3 villages. This is because who's not living in the village right here? Who's just kind of a guest? Okay. So this is kind of geared toward Fayetteville because I got the invitation from Fayetteville. At some point in time, I could do it for any of the other 2 villages or the rest of the town as a whole. But we're looking at Fayetteville. We've got 1,636 parcels, residentials, and 116 vacant parcels and 139 commercials. And we'll talk a little bit about the assessment process that goes into all of that. Yeah, same thing again. Good. Again, geared toward the village of Fayetteville. In 2023, I'm going to have to move around. In 2023, the assessed value for the village was $495 million, and the taxable was $448 million. The difference between those numbers is tax-exempt properties. Case in point, we're in a tax-exempt property. I'm still charged with assessing the value of this property, as along with churches and other nonprofits, the schools come into play. I have to assess that, but then the taxable portion, the portion that people will actually pay taxes on, is that $448 million. In 2024, there was a 13.96% increase in the assessed value and a 13.26% increase in the taxable value. Questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Why did it jump up so high? 13%.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's all market process a little bit here, and we'll see where we go with that. If I don't answer your question, please bring it up again. Yes.
Do we expect another 13.9% increase in 2025?
I'm sorry, what's your address? No. No, I'll tell you right now, we're in the preliminary stages for putting the final numbers onto the tentative roll, which comes out on May 1st, and I'll talk a little bit about that. things are still shifting around. We're still finishing up the analysis, but it's all sales driven. And so there's a lot of things that go into the meat and potatoes, and I'll try and cut through it and get to the answer. Yes, ma'am.
Why the difference between .96 and .26?
Just the taxes, or the taxable value, I'm sorry, because of exemptions that come into play. So we have the assessed value, and then, of course, people will come in and apply for various exemptions, which will change the taxable value. All right?
Just for the sake of the exemptions, which ones are you talking about? Star?
All of them. But the STAR is school tax relief, and we'll address that. We'll hit on it a little bit. STAR exemptions are obviously very popular. The seniors exemption is very popular. Veterans exemptions within the village are pretty numerous as well. So what is an assessor? Well, an assessor does basically the same thing that a fee appraiser does. If you're going out and you're going to buy a house and you're going to get a mortgage, you're going to have a phone call from an appraiser from the bank asking to come over and do a walkthrough inspection on the property. They're going to collect up the data, and they're going to gather the data. They're going to analyze the marketplace, and then they render an opinion as to what they think the value of that property is and see if you actually qualify for the mortgage. The difference is, as an assessor, I have to do assessment administration, which includes those exemptions that we were just talking about. And the assessor is also responsible for public relations. Here we are. Okay, so the authority to go and value properties, if it's my mother, tell her I'm not here. The authority to go and assess is vested in the assessor through the real property tax law. That's the primary set of laws that govern what I have to go and do. There's other laws that come into play. Ag and market laws come into play. The real property law, they're different from the real property tax law, that comes into play. Ags and markets, the one with the ag exemptions. So we'll talk a little bit about some of that. So not everyone can become an assessor, even if you really wanted to. You have to go through an education process. You have to get it accomplished within 2 years of your appointment. These are some of the classes that I have to go through. These are mandatory classes, by the way, before I get certified by New York State, or any assessor gets certified by New York State. Not only do you have to go and take those classes right there, but you also have to take electives. And the introduction to the farm appraisal, it's an optional class unless 15% of the tax roll is agricultural. Then it's mandatory. Assessors have to take that as well. We don't have to worry about forest valuation. That's mostly up in the North Country. We must maintain an average of 12 hours of continuing ed. It used to be 24 hours, and then the state said, we'll go soft on you. We're going to lower the bar. I don't agree with that, but okay, it is what it is. Once you get certified as an assessor, there's another step up. The more classes you take, you can become a state certified assessor advanced, and then beyond that, the state certified assessor professional. I'm an IAO, and let me tell you something, that is an exceptionally tough exam. You wind up, it's a 5-hour exam, and you have to have served as an assessor for 5 years. I took that exam down at Cornell, and I can remember after I finished with that exam, I got into my car, and I remember getting in the car, and I remember pulling into the driveway. I don't remember anything in between. I'm serious. It was just, I was brain dead. That thing tested everything about being an assessor. So there's a couple of types of assessors. I'm an appointed assessor. I'm on a 6-year term. There's also a board of assessors. Those are typically 3 people that comprise the board of assessors. Those are a dying breed. They're on the way out. They're more prevalent downstate, lower Hudson Valley, in some cases out on Long Island. There's also the sole elected assessor, and a very rare one is civil service. Civil service, if you're an assessor and you get one of those appointments, you're golden for life. They can't get rid of you, or they can try, but and I've seen that happen where I won't go into details. But seriously, the civil service, it guarantees the assessor job security, but it also could be a pain in the backside for the politicians because you have an assessor who goes rogue on it and there's no way to reel him in, or her. So the duties of the assessor, multifold. Got to locate the property. And just because there wasn't a building there yesterday doesn't mean that there's not a building there today. I've got to notify the owners when and where the data is available. There's a legal notice that goes in the paper on April 1st, which says we've got the data available. We've also made a lot of advances in the last 15, 20 years. A lot of this information is now online. If you go to ongov.net, there's a system within the Real Property Tax Department. It's called Image Made Online. You can go through this. You can take a look at all of the data on your neighbors. You can see what kind of exemptions they have. You can also take a look at pictometry. You can take a look at pictometry's aerial photographs, not satellite. There's a lot of data available. It's open to the public. It's as transparent as you can get. We have to go and obviously determine who the owner of the properties are, and that all comes by way of deeds. We get these deeds 1 or 2 times a month, and sometimes they're running 4 to 6 weeks behind. So if you come in and you're looking for an exemption right now, we're going to ask you for the deed to the property, but you'll have it, we won't. So that's something just to keep in mind. Obviously, we value real property. Real property is all the tangible stuff. We do not, in New York State, value personal property. And personal property could be automobiles. It could be cows. In fact, like in Massachusetts, one of the great old-time passages in Massachusetts is springtime. Farmers will take half their herd and push it up over on the other side of the hill so that when the assessor comes along, they only count 50 head of cattle versus the 150 on the other side. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about the personal property. Exemptions. We're going to talk about exemptions here in a little bit. There's enough of them, and then some. Exemptions based on your qualifications will lower your tax bill, but it also passes it off to your neighbors. So if you qualify for a veterans exemption, congratulations, but someone else is going to pick up the tab. And it really gets fun because what you find is you've got a veterans exemption, so you pass it off to the lady behind you who has a seniors exemption, who passes it back to you, who then winds up passing off the seniors to other people who now, here's a retired clergy member who's now farming, and it gets really insane. Mail change of assessment notices. Those are coming out in the first week in May. So stay tuned. We'll get into the calendar here in just a bit. And then, of course, defend the values. And I'll tell you, you know what? I'm looking at this right now. I'm not a big fan of necessarily defending the value as much as I am explaining the value. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. I'll admit that it's wrong in certain occasions. But I think I got to change that. Because I think that kind of encourages people into a mindset of, well, if you're on the defense, then I have to go on the offense, and it doesn't have to be offensive. Prepare and submit annual reports to ORPS, the Office of Real Property Tax Services. That comes in July. That's the assessor's annual report. Obviously, I need to obtain certification. I'm very fortunate in town. I've been here since 2005. I have had nothing but great support from the town board. Remember that on the next budget hearings. But no, seriously, this town board has just been phenomenal in terms of the support that my office receives. I have right now one lady who is an assessor. She's an assessor part-time in another town. She goes there after she leaves Manlius, and she works there 1 day a week, weekday, and on the weekend as well, and I know she does work at home as well. But she's also an IAO. I've got another lady who just finished up her certification to be a state certified candidate for assessor as well. I am a fanatic when it comes to education. Education for me is one of those things that educating the staff, they help me go and do my job. It helps them go and do their job. And more importantly, it helps them to go and help you when you come to the window. Critical. Yeah, manage the office. It's a very well-run, oiled machine. It really is good. Of course, I already mentioned public relations. We analyze the marketplace and defend the values at SCAR. SCAR is a small claims assessment review. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Next couple of slides. This is actually taken from the Office of Real Property Tax Services, ORPS. If you hear me say ORPS, that's New York State. This was taken from their website. If you notice, from 2024 down to 2014, Manlius has been at 100%. And if you go back even further, Manlius has been at 100%. And go back even further, and Manlius has still been at 100%. In fact, there is only one municipality in New York State, that's the city of Plattsburgh, that can match us year for year at being 100%. Yes? It means 100% of the time Pat Duffy is right. It means that the values of the properties are matching the sales, or the sales are matching the assessments. There are 3 towns in Onondaga County right now, Manlius, DeWitt, and Tully, that are certified at being 100% of market value, certified by New York State. They run through a litany of statistical analysis, as do I, in terms of figuring out where are my assessments relative to the sales that are coming in. And this goes back to your question, are we looking at another 13%? Stay tuned. I don't mean to scare you or anything, but as the marketplace so goes the assessments. If you think that the market, think back in 2008 when the marketplace went down, the assessments went down too. If you have your records, go back and check it. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain what it would be if it wasn't 100%, what everybody else is doing around it?
Yes, I can. And I'm going to explain that, and hopefully I'm going to illustrate it here in the next slide or two. Yes?
Can you explain the advantage of being at full market value when other villages and towns are not? I mean, that's some concerns. You seem proud of it, so what's the advantage to our town being at full market value?
You saw the slideshow, didn't you? This is the next slide. This is answering your question. This is Jeopardy. You know, she asked the question before the answer comes up. Okay, this is goofy, but look at the 4 different colors right here, and disregard those lines in between. But let's say that you have 4 different neighborhoods, whether it's in the village or 4 neighborhoods within the town. And I'm talking economic neighborhoods. I'm not talking geographic neighborhoods. So let's say that neighborhood 1, on an annual basis, increases by 3% per year. Just year in and year out, it always seems to tag 3%. Neighborhood 2 comes up at 5% every year. Neighborhood 3 increases 8%, and neighborhood 4 increases at 11%. So by doing annual reassessment, our assessments go and track what the marketplace is doing. If we did not do 100%, okay, this is neighborhood 1, and this is increasing at 3%. This is I'm glad you asked that question, because seriously, I was at my desk here probably about 2 hours ago putting this slide together because I thought someone was going to ask the question. By the way, I owe you $20 later on. But here is the assessments at 3%. In this year, if the assessment was $200,000 and it increased 3% per year, like the rest of the neighborhood does, then that's what the assessment's going to be. If we relied on the equalization rate is, and I'll show you the formula for here in a minute. The equalization rate is a number that the New York State has come up with. It's a one-size-fits-all. The equalization rate is the same number regardless of the neighborhood, regardless of whether it's residential, vacant, agricultural, or commercial. It's a one-size-fits-all number. So the world that we're in right now, we're increasing based on what the marketplace is. And again, this is all hypothetical, but if you go 3% per year, in 5 years, the assessment's going to be up to $225,000 in loose change. If you relied on the equalization rate is like Newton's third law of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So as the equalization rate drops, it means that the value has gone up. So you sit here in a town that doesn't do annual reassessment, and you say, oh, look, I didn't get an increase in my assessment. Whew, dodged a bullet. Well, you didn't. Because what will happen then is the assessment will stay at $200,000, and everyone is very happy with that because my assessment didn't go up. But if you go and take the $200,000 because you're at fractional assessment, as that equalization rate drops, that value increases. So when everything is said and done, in year 5, if we maintain the annual reassessment, we come in at $225,000. But if you went with the equalization rate, you would have an assessed value of $264,000. So the lower end properties here, the ones that are only increasing at 3% per year, are going to be paying $34,700 more in this hypothetical scenario here. All right? The flip side of it, and I could do neighborhood 2 and 3, 2 and 3. I'm going to skip right to neighborhood 4. Same scenario plays out. So here's an assessment. The house starts off, again, $200,000, just like everyone else. Whoops. Bad mouse. There we go. So again, just like neighborhoods 1, 2, and 3, neighborhood 4 starts off at $200,000, and we're at 100%, and therefore the assessment's 100%. Now it increases by 11% per year, until 5 years from now, that assessment goes from $200,000 to $303,000. That's based on annual reassessment. If we dropped out and we relied strictly on the equalization rate, and that's the abbreviation equalization rate, we started off at 100%, but let's say that it drops by 6.75% per year. Now the equalization rate gets down, and again, the assessments would have stayed the same, and everyone on the surface looks happy because my assessment didn't go up. But in fact, the values have actually gone up. And in fact, if you take a look at it, instead of it being assessed at $303,000, based on that equalization rate, they're only going to be at $274,000. You see the disparity between neighborhood 4 and neighborhood 1? The lower accelerating neighborhood, the 3%, is going to wind up being assessed higher, and consequently they're going to wind up paying a disproportionate share of the tax levy. Flip side is the neighborhood that's going on like a Los Angeles neighborhood, like a house on fire. Bad joke, sorry. They're going to wind up not paying their fair share. Someone else is going to wind up having to pick up that load there. Yes, ma'am.
I'm trying to follow you, and are you saying that, if you don't go with the equalization rate of 100%, and they don't reassess the property every year, that they're going to reassess in year 5, and when they do that, the assessment will be actually lower than if you stayed?
No, I'm not saying, what I'm saying is that I have two choices here. I can go and either maintain the town at 100% to ensure that everyone's paying their fair share.
But that would be everybody in our town,
Correct.
in our town.
Correct. And then you have the equalization rate, which, if I can go back here. Sorry about those grid lines there. The average of the 3, 5, 8, and 11% is 6.75. So it's going to be one number fits all. Whether that's here internally within the town or that's within the county, every town within the county gets an equalization rate as well. As I said, DeWitt and Tully are also at 100%. You take a look at Fabius, Pompey, Cicero, they're at something less. But they wind up getting hit with an equalization rate. You really just don't go and dodge the bullet. It's going to hit home one way or the other. But again, you're going to be grouped in with other classes of properties. You're going to be grouped in with, if you're sitting in a $150,000 house, you're going to be grouped in with the $700,000 and $800,000 houses down in Mallards. Yes, sir.
I'm confused. I thought you said we don't use the equalization rate here, we use 100%. So why are we even talking about this?
Because the question came up, why are we at 100%? This is the consequences if you're not at 100%. Within the village, within the town, within the county, based on the equalization rate, we either pay a fair share or we don't pay a fair share. But someone else winds up picking up the load. In fact, we would wind up picking up the load.
I guess it comes down to who sets that equalization rate, because if you play with numbers, I know something about numbers. Depending on how you play with those numbers, you can come out ahead out of your equalization rate, or you can come out losing. Your example shows us losing. We can actually come out ahead. And it all comes down to what those numbers are, and who's making it, who makes that. Little by game with the numbers, simply we all win.
Yeah, if you're in neighborhood 1 and you're paying 3%, your values are going up only 3%. You're going to get grouped in with everyone else, and you're going to see your values actually going up 6.75% based on the overall equalization rate.
Who sets the equalization rate?
New York State, the Office of Real Property Tax Services. And if you hold that thought, I'll show you the formula here, which is very simplistic, but it holds true. Okay, so I talked about the real property tax law. The big driving train here is Section 305. Everything has to be assessed at a uniform percentage of value. Does it say it has to be 100%? No. But 100% is transparent. Everyone understands. If you buy a house for $200,000 and you get a change of assessment notice that says you're $300,000, you know something's wrong there. Yes, sir.
So we've been at 100% for quite a few years. I've lived in the village since the mid-90s, two different homes. Except for the last 2 years, our assessment in either home was never really close to the market value. But the last 2 years, it's pretty close. We've had some increase in market value, but we've had some really big increases in assessed value. So I'm not following where you say, we've been at 100% assessment for many years, but that's not our experience. We've always been below. Our assessment has always been below, except for the last couple of years.
In my experience is the opposite of yours. We
Nope.
got assessed and it was way above what I looked at all the sales in our neighborhood, and the comparable houses in our neighborhood were actually selling in the past year for much less than our house was assessed at.
You know what? I'm going to pass a microphone around because it is being videoed. If you could just hold that and pass it off to someone else who has the question, I just want to make sure whoever's hearing the recording can talk about it. When I say 100%, does that mean everyone is exactly right where it should be? I come up with an assessed value. Does that mean what you can sell the house for? No. What it means is that, well, I'll get into the calendar here, but it's also based on values of properties that have sold last July. I'm coming out with an assessment roll on May 1st of this year. By law, I can only use the sales up to last year, up to July 1st of last year. And again, if we get into the calendar, which we will. Yes, sir.
Push the button. What is the load? The budget? Pardon me? What is the load? The budget?
The load, you're talking about the tax levy.
Huh? And where does that come from? I don't know.
The tax levy is actually part of the overall budget. It comes from the village trustees, the town board, county legislature, and the school board. Okay. Yeah, I was talking about the assessment calendar here. Valuation date is July 1st of last year. This takes into consideration all of the sales up to that point. So depending on what the marketplace was doing up to that time frame, will go and determine where the assessments are going this year. So if you sit down and say, okay, look, my next door neighbor just sold their house for $300,000, but yet it's only assessed for $250,000, it's not 100%. Go back a little bit further and see what the sales were taking place and see if it doesn't change coming up on the next roll. I will tell you there is something called Welcome Stranger. Welcome Stranger was a practice in the past where someone would move into the house, the assessor would knock on the door and say, welcome stranger, I'm just here to reassess your house. Every house in the street was $100,000 except for this one just bought $150,000. And that was the assessed value that wound up getting bumped up. That happened one time to a lawyer, and the lawyer sued over the practice. It was a discriminatory practice, both here in New York State, and there was a similar case that came out of Pennsylvania that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. So just because the house sells for X amount of dollars doesn't mean the next time it comes out, it's going to be assessed for X amount of dollars. It could be more or it could be less. It's all driven by the marketplace and what the analysis of the marketplace would support the assessed value being.
But wouldn't the marketplace value in the neighborhood, why would one house be higher value than the other comparable houses in the same neighborhood? Wouldn't they be around the same amount?
Define comparable.
Well, in my case, they're all kind of built at the same time, they're all kind of the same size, so,
Do they all have swimming pools?
no,
Do they all have three-car garages?
no.
Do they all have a pole barn in the back? Okay. So there are, and do they all have finished basements? Think about this. You have two absolutely identical houses sitting side by side. This is something called paired sales analysis. Two identical houses built by the same builder, same crews, same quality of workmanship. They build the house. That one house sells for $200,000. The other one sells for $202,000. And the only difference is the one with the $202,000 has a 16 by 14 deck on the back. What's the contributory value of the deck? $2,000. Very simplistic, but that's what's going into this whole equation here. Number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, finished basement, unfinished basement. Two identical houses sitting side by side. Both are on the marketplace for $300,000. One's got gas heat, the other one's got electric heat. Which one are you buying? So they appear comparable, but they're not.
But if you look at the houses that are sold
Mm-hmm.
in your neighborhood, and your house is significantly higher and it's not significantly different, then why is it being assessed higher?
I'll tell you how you solve that.
Okay.
Okay? We'll get to it.
Yes, sir.
You scared me when you said it's, that the seller is done or not done. You don't know that.
In large part, yes. It's a discriminator.
You don't know.
Pardon me?
You agree.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You know, you drive through a neighborhood on the weekend.
He just gave you an example of houses in his neighborhood that were the same, and then you threw all the other things. I know you can see a swimming pool, you see this, you see that. You don't know whether the house is done inside. So,
You'd be surprised.
when you said that.
Yeah. First off, the value that's put on, quote unquote, a finished basement is minimal. But it's a discriminator. If I know about it, I have to do something about it. Whether
You know about it.
you would be surprised about your neighbors coming in and talking to me.
Can you use that information?
Yes, you could.
How do you know?
Then, well, yeah, and you're right. There's a man's home, pardon the sexism, man's home is still the castle. I can knock on the door and you can say, not only am I not letting you in the house, but get off my property right now. And it's like, okay, I have to do that. So, yeah, there's some issues that come into play on it.
next door and say, I hear you've been in the house a lot, tell me all about it, and you can use that information.
It's something to go and take a look at.
I bet you
What, on the inside? Well, I start off by putting finished basement on every single house, and then people coming in say, no, I don't have it. And then it's like, no, I'm just kidding. It's a joke. No, it's a judgment. I've been in this business now for about 35 years, and it's a judgment call. It really is. I can't ignore it. When I get people coming in and saying you need to go and take a look at it, yeah, our code enforcement officer goes out. They have to do an electrical inspection because someone's finishing off the basement, or they're putting another bathroom in, plumbing. Yeah, well, but it's coming. Yes, ma'am.
I've got a question. I know several people in the village here who receive letters after purchasing a house from the town that are like 3 pages long with a survey basically
Yep.
about, did you buy your house with cash? Do you have a mortgage? All these intricate questions about the house, and they're supposed to send that to the town. Now, none of the people that I know have sent those in, because to them, it's none of the town's business. But what does that have to do with the assessor's office? Obviously, that's where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, the question is, we do send out these sales verification forms. So it's trying to be transparent about it. It's trying to give you participation in the process. If I sent you something that says you got 4.5 bathrooms and you only have 2.5, it would be in your interest to send it back and do a correction on it.
Now, this seemed pretty open-ended. You just wanted a lot of information. And it didn't say it was required.
No, it's not.
People would naively just send that to the town. And I don't think that is wrong.
Do you know if it wasn't the assessor, not your office?
Yeah, it is my office.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is his office.
Yeah.
Everybody I know that's gotten one has not sent it in.
I'm trying to put the finger on the pulse. You know, it's not going to say the patient's going to live or die,
Well, it's
but
almost like you're asking, there are a lot of people out there that will tell you all kinds of information. And what you do with it, you do with it.
that's true.
And if you're gonna ask all this information, the person gets this 3-page, thing in the mail, and then, oh, I guess I better send that in, it's like, it's not required. Why would you give them, who cares if you pay cash? Who cares if you have a mortgage? To me, it's nobody's business.
It goes to the heart of the financing.
Okay, so we got a working microphone now, so if we can use this, because it'll be easier for people that want to watch to hear.
Thank you.
If you ask your questions on here, so.
Yeah, I meant to go and recite them back.
You mentioned twice about swimming pools. Are you saying that adding a swimming pool or having a swimming pool adds to the value of the assessment? Because, well, I'll let you answer that first.
Potentially, yes, it
Because
does.
it does not add to the value of a resale for a home. You do
It-
not get 1 penny in when you're selling your home more, like for value.
Right now, it runs anywhere between $25,000 to $50,000 to put an in-ground pool in, depending on how elaborate you want to get with it. Your employer calls you and says, I got the deal of a lifetime for you. We're going to double your salary and cut your hours in half, but you have to move to North Carolina. You're not going to get your $25,000 back, let alone your $50,000. But there are people out there who will go and buy a property because it has a pool, and they overlook properties because it doesn't have a pool.
that's
When
just a
I was
personal
looking for a
preference.
house, I had kids. I didn't want a pool.
Right, but that's a personal preference. So why would you tax them more for something that's just a personal preference when it
I'm
does
not
add
taxing them. I'm
value?
assessing.
It's the same thing. It still adds to.
No, it's again. I am not the tax assessor. I am
Assessing
valuing the
it for
properties
more.
based on the sales. Again, we go back to that paired sales analysis. If I take a look at it, and again, it's very simplistic, but 2 identical houses sitting side by side. One has a pool, the other one doesn't. One sells for $303,000, the other one sells for $300,000. What's the contributory value of the pool?
Maybe nothing.
Maybe nothing. But that's why I have
They
to look
might
at
have a
more
better
than one
kitchen.
sale. Yeah.
So it might have nothing to do with it. But okay. And then my other question is there an actual formula for the assessments / taxes on how it is?
We're going to come back to that question.
Okay. Yeah, no.
So as I said, we're basing the values of the properties coming out on the tentative roll on May 1st of this year based on sales up to July 1st. Taxable status date is March 1st of this year. The law says everything that stands as it stands on March 1st, gets assessed. I had a developer, I used to be the assessor up in Cicero. I had a developer, a builder, who came in and he had a house that was only 50% complete. He wound up getting a 50% assessment on it. And he was saying, well, no one wants to buy a 50% house. He says, it's absolutely worthless. All it is framing and maybe has the roof on it. And he says, so it's worthless. And he said, insofar as the value of the land is concerned, there is no value to the land simply because there's this monstrosity that no one wants to go and buy. So he said it was worthless. I said, great point. I'll tell you what. Next year, when March 1st comes around, I'm going to go out and take a look at a house, and I'll buy it off you for $100. And his response was, fine, I'll charge you an arm and a leg to finish it. And my question to him was, what makes you think you're going to finish it? There's more builders out there than just him. He conceded the point. He understood if he went bankrupt and he had to sell the half-completed house, it still has value to it. So again, everything gets assessed on taxable status date. Tentative roll comes out on May 1st. Grievance day is always the fourth Tuesday in May. Well, almost always the fourth Tuesday in May. At one point in time when I was up in Cicero, I was also at the same time the assessor in West Monroe. And by law, I have to be with the Board of Assessment and Review when they sit on grievance day, and I can't be in two places at one time. So when that circumstance comes up, then yes, the assessor, the town can go and legally pass a local law changing the grievance day, but it would have to be after the fourth Tuesday in May. And then finally, after grievance day, Board of Assessment Review does their deliberations. They hand me a list of numbers, and I, by law, have to change it. There is no appeal for me. If I disagree with the Board of Assessment Review, it's too bad, so sad, Pat Duffy. It just, if you don't agree with it, it is what it is. And that's, as I said, the final roll comes out on July 1st. The village bills that are coming out in June are based on last year's roll, not the roll that's coming up this year, but last year's roll. So take that with a grain of salt. Well, that's kind of expensive nowadays, too. Yeah, much more.
How many grievances do you see, and how many concessions are there?
Not as many as you think. I'm trying to remember the numbers. That's a great question because I do the statistics on it. Last year we sent out just over 13,000 change of assessment notices, and of that we had probably about 400 grievances.
And how many concessions were there on those?
Maybe about a third.
Could it be less? Or you didn't seem too confident.
Yeah, like I said, I give my office a call. I've got the numbers. And remind me what your address is. No, it's a legitimate question, and in all honesty, it's one I should have come prepared for. But yes, sir.
It's been a long time since I was a local lawmaker, but as I remember, I had a bunch of teaching by a state auditor about how accounting is done and tax assessments and all that. And I remember learning that all properties get assessed, whether they're taxable or not. Correct. So churches, even maybe parklands, hospitals, this building, they all get assessed because that assessed value is used on other calculations like fire department costs between town and village and things like that. So just...
That's the taxable value. And
Yeah.
that was that opening slide that I showed you in terms of the village. Oh, I'm sorry.
I wasn't here at that moment, but
Yeah, I was showing a slide earlier which talked about the assessed value of the village of Fayetteville
Right.
for 2023 and 2024, and then I also showed the taxable values as well. And the taxable values obviously were less than the assessed value. But you're absolutely right. Everything gets assessed.
yeah. And it's
Everything.
kind of interesting too, not that it's Village of Fayetteville thing, but as I've learned it somewhere, I think it's still the same, the biggest taxpayer in the whole town of Manlius is, it's also a very hazardous use. It's called the CSX Railroad.
National Grid.
Maybe. We'll see. They each
Yeah.
have their own hazards, but the CSX pays tax on all their property, and National Grid doesn't necessarily
Yeah,
pay tax.
and we'll talk about railroads too.
Yeah.
You're all getting ahead of putting the cart ahead of the horse here. But yeah, railroads certainly are a problem. And we'll talk about that just a little bit as we move forward. Whoops, sorry. How are the assessments determined? Three approaches to value. One is the cost approach. Every property has cost built into it. Town hall or village hall. How much does it cost to build? And if it's not new, subtract out depreciation. Every house has cost. Agreed? Ultimately, the house will depreciate. At some point in time, 25 years, you're going to have to replace the roof. Depreciation comes into play. But that depreciation could also be offset by increases. When I was a kid, I can remember a 2x4 being $1.50. Try and find a 2x4x8 for $1.50 nowadays. So that's the cost approach. Every property has it. I like the cost approach. Here in New York State, we've got New York State's got a license agreement with Marshall Swift Beck. It is the premier valuation service in the entire country. They go out and they survey architects, engineers, construction companies, and they figure out on a regional basis, and actually down to a zip code, they can tell you what it would cost to go and build a particular building, whether it's a commercial, residential, a barn, but we've got the cost approach there. I'm going to go and disappoint you in terms of having access to that. It's licensed through New York State. We've got it on a software program. It's proprietary. We don't even have the tables behind the scenes that I can turn right around and give to you if you foiled it. You would have to foil New York State, and New York State would probably tell you that it's exempt from FOIL simply because of the proprietary information. It's a contract with Marshall Swift Beck. Market approach speaks for itself. You know, it's how does your house compare to other houses that have sold? We talked about that Parrot sales analysis. We talked about the identical houses. We talked about the difference being a deck, or maybe it's a 2-car garage versus a 3-car, or maybe even a 1-car. But again, it's going through and taking a look at what is it that people are paying for the various commodities that go into it. The income approach is almost exclusive to commercial properties. And this is actually what the court's like. If I wind up getting sued and along with the town, and it's a commercial property, it has to go to an Article 7. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. And but it's based on the income. And the income is not the income of the business, but the income of the real estate. How much are people willing to go and pay on a per square foot basis for Starbucks? And then so you look at the potential gross income and you subtract out vacancies and credit losses. Vacancy is you've got a Starbucks, it was there, now it's vacant. Take off 5% from the potential gross income. Or better yet, let's go with an example of, say, a motel. Motel's got 20 apartments, 20 units in it. Each one of those units rent out 365 days a year. That's the potential gross income. But we know that it doesn't rent out all 365 days a year. We know that there's going to be vacancies in there. So that gets subtracted out from the PGI, the potential gross income. We also give credit for credit losses. Credit losses are you go and write a check, and then you skip town, and then the check goes and bounces. That potential gross income minus the vacancy and credit loss gives you an effective gross income. From the effective gross income, I subtract out the operating expenses. How much does it cost to turn on the lights? How much does it cost to heat the building? How much does it cost to go and operate the snow plows and the landscaping and the garbage removal and the insurance and on and on and on? Those are all operating expenses specific to different types of buildings, different uses. That, when you take it out, comes down to the net operating income. The net operating income then is divided by a cap rate, which is something that's driven by the financial markets. And you divide the cap rate into the net operating income, and that will give you an indication of value for commercial properties. I hang a hat on that one. That I go out and I'm looking for that income information all the time, and that's why I think we're in pretty good shape every time we hit the commercials. Factors that may contribute to inequity. We go back to, do I have all the data? No, I don't. But I can only do what I can do within the limits of the law. I can't go kicking in people's doors. But I've got to locate the property, and typically we're looking at neighborhoods, property types. Again, I talked about residentials versus vacants versus commercials versus farms, but also look at building styles. Very popular building style is colonials. In fact, that is the most popular building style in the town that sells. Ranch houses. Ranch houses sell for a premium price. Think about this for a second. You have 1,000 square foot footprint of a house, and you put on top of it another 1,000 square feet. Now you have yourself a 2,000 square foot colonial. 2,000 square foot ranch house stretches out. You've got 2,000 square feet of plumbing, you've got 2,000 square feet of roof, ductwork, everything else that goes into it. So ranches traditionally, historically, command a higher price in the marketplace. I'll speak for myself. I'm a aging baby boomer. I've got the knees to prove it. And so, yeah, my wife wants a ranch house, and then I guess we're going to be looking at a ranch house. Date of sales. We have enough sales here in the town that we don't have to go back further. There's other towns where you don't have enough sales and you have to do a time trend on it. Fortunately, we have more than enough sales to go and do what we need to do. We look at construction grade. You know, we hope that we have information on a 2x4 versus a 2x6. Construction grade goes to two primary issues. Number one is the materials being used, and secondly, the workmanship that goes into it. Think about a gabled roof house versus a contemporary with all the peaks and valleys in it. You know, different labor force that has to come into play for that one, for that contemporary, and the materials may very well be different too. You may wind up seeing a slate roof as well. Size of the property. You know, everyone. Not everyone. A lot of people come in and just say, well, why don't you base it on square footage? And my response is, geez, I wish I could do it just based on square footage, because I could go and get this whole town reassessed in about 2 weeks and go home for the rest of the year. It doesn't work that way. It's not that easy. And then, of course, we talked about the cost approach. We talked about depreciation coming into play. We're talking about the age on it. We look at things, functional obsolescence. You know, go down to New York City. There's elevators there that have the old elevator operator, right? They open up the inside door, they open up the outside door, and you come in, and you close the door, and they move the handle, and they take you up, and when you get to the floor, they stop it. It works. It's an elevator. It does its job. Functionally, it's obsolete. Furnaces. Go back to a furnace in the 1920s, the old octopus furnace, coal-burning furnace. It works, but it's functionally, it's obsolete. Yes, sir.
It's on. I could just talking to
This is just a question because you mentioned about materials, and this is a personal question for me. For siding, is wood more popular than some of the new synthetic stuff? Just my own curiosity. Does it make a difference?
The only place where I see making a difference, you know, we can talk about other materials. We can talk about aluminum siding. We talk about vinyl siding. Realistically, no. The siding doesn't make a whole world of difference. What will make a difference is brick and stone, because you're talking about a whole different set of materials and the workmanship, that the labor force that has to be brought in to go and put it in place.
Thank you. Very interesting.
I'll be out at your house tomorrow. Just kidding. Actions of the assessor that causes inequities. Problems with the data. Surprise, right? Didn't see that one coming. Lacking, inadequate, inaccurate, not uniformly collected. I will tell you, the technology that we have available nowadays, and I'm going to caveat this, just like you can't go and judge a book by its cover, you cannot judge the full value of a house strictly from the outside. You know, I'll give you a perfect example. There was a guy, I was working on a reval project back in the early 90s up in the town of Scriba, and this guy was very adamant against giving the assessor any information. This gentleman sent my office a note, stay off my property. I don't want you on my property. Guy had brand new vinyl siding on the house, and he spray painted the side of the house saying, Assessment Services Company, stay off my property. That was the company I worked for. He also pushed his station wagon up to the front of the road and spray painted a message to us on that one, I will not repeat. So in any case, I wound up going to this other, fine, you don't want us on the property, we're good. There was a house probably about, as the crow flies, about a quarter of a mile away. And I knocked on the door, a young lady comes down, and she says, well, it's not my house, I'm renting it. I have to go and have my uncle come and say whether or not you want to come into the house. She goes and gives him a call. He shows up, he gets out of his car, and he says, I want your name, I want your badge number, I'm going to sue you, I'm going to sue your company, I'm going to go and sue the town, and on and on and on. And come to find out, this was the gentleman who owned the house that he spray painted. Well, I talked him down off the ledge, and believe it or not, he invited me over to his house to come inside. And as I said, brand new vinyl siding, new windows and what have you. I go in, the downstairs was just pristine, just complete makeover on this house. He takes me upstairs, and there was not a stitch of drywall on the second floor. In fact, there was quite a few burnt timbers. He had a major house fire, and he was in the process of rebuilding it. And I looked at him and I said, why would you not want me to see this? So you can help, the old saying, God helps those that help themselves. What's good for God is good for Pat Duffy. I will help, seriously. But we're very good. I've got two new clerks, well, relatively new. They've been there for 2 years. They went off to a clerk's meeting, an Onondaga County Assessor's Clerk meeting, and they came back and they were absolutely blown away by how much they knew and how much their counterparts in other towns did not know. And I'm very proud of the staff that we have. And I think as taxpayers, you should be very proud of the staff. I mean, you really should see what they know and how they help the public. I haven't had to go and criticize any one of my staff members for being rude, crude, or socially unacceptable to a taxpayer. You pay my salary and I won't put up with it, but I don't have to worry about it because, as I said, they're very professional, very, very professional. Problems with the property data. Also assessment or political neglect. There was a town a few years ago that was at 100%, and they dropped out of the reassessment process, and their equalization rate is dropping like a rock. I, just out of curiosity, did some spot analysis on it, just because when I'm looking to go and value properties here in this town, I do have to go into other towns and look at it, more so with the commercials. For example, we have Green Lakes Bowling Alley just down the road. There's no other bowling alley in the town. There used to be one up on Manlius Center. But I have to go outside of the town looking for sales of other properties, and I happened to be looking in this other town, and it was just like, yeah, that's assessment neglect. Political neglect, sorry, Sarah, but it doesn't apply to you because we're at 100%. Political neglect is a lot of times the politicians are afraid of where their next vote is coming. And reassessment is not a popular subject among politicians, but if you're at 100%, you don't have to worry about it. I actually, when I was up in Cicero, I got invited down to the town of Vestal for a consultation because they were under a court order to do a reassessment. And I went down there and we took a look at it. And one of the things the politicians were trying to wrestle with was how do we go and sell this to the public besides the fact that it's a court order. And the answer was they put together a 17-person committee that went and studied the assessment process. and then they made their recommendations. They said, this is where we are, this is where we need to be, and these are a couple of paths that we can take to get to that goal. And they presented that to the town board, and the town board accepted it. And that's how they went about the process. It was a participatory committee that they had chaplains, lawyers, butchers, the whole range of different occupations came into play to study the process and then make a recommendation to the politicians. And that's really a great way. We don't have to worry about it because we're already there. But the courts, we talked about earlier, that one slide, Section 305 of the Real Property Tax Law, uniform percentage. The courts have been known, time and time again, to come in when sued to order a reassessment. So you can go and pay us now or you can pay us later. And we'll talk about some of the stats, especially when the COD, the coefficient of dispersion, gets out of kilter. Appraisal's not performed well. They're not done at all, or they're biased. There's guesswork. Let me caveat guesswork. Assessments, just like the appraisal. You get a fee appraiser coming in from your bank. You're looking for a second mortgage or home equity loan or whatever the case may be. The assessment process, the appraisal process is part science and it's part art. And if you think about a pyramid where you collect up all this data and you build this and you start building upward and you're trying to get to that pinnacle, you're looking to go and say, okay, what's the true value of this property? You'll never get there. What you have to do is get as close as you can, and then you make a professional estimate in terms of what would it take to go and finish that up. So if you take a look at an appraisal, the bottom line, just before the appraiser signs the appraisal report, it will say something to the effect that on this date, in my professional opinion, this is what the property is worth. Now, why do I say as of this date? Same thing that we have to do. We say as of March 1st, this is what the status of the property was. Many years ago in Skinny Atlas, there was a gentleman who went downstairs into his basement and smelled gasoline. And he had to call the DEC. They come in. Just up the road and up the hill was a gas station. Gas tank was leaking. So the value that the property was today doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the value come tomorrow. I mean, you try and sell a house with the smell of gasoline down in the basement. It's not going to fly. We talked about the railroad ceilings. Those are values that are put on by New York State by law. I don't touch the values. They tell me what the values are going to be. Back in the mid to late 90s, Manlius was on the receiving end of a very nasty lawsuit from CSX, as was DeWitt and any other municipality along the railroads. And long and short of it was New York State wound up having to come in and fund a lot of the legal expenses that the municipalities took up. And so New York State does that. Special franchise. Special franchise are real property that's typically within the public right-of-way. Telephone poles, transformers, wires. They could be a problem. Back early 2000s, there was a tremendous ice storm that hit Rochester. And Rochester has RG&E, Rochester Gas and Electric. And this small army of utility companies came in and started taking out the old poles, new ones, running wires and what have you. And come the next year, nothing changed on the special franchise. And so the city of Rochester went to court over the whole thing. And the RG&E says, we don't know how much was rolled out in terms of wires or poles or whatever. I guarantee you they got the bill for it. But that does tend to be a problem from time to time. Condominiums. Condominiums, yeah, you have a couple of condominiums here in the village, right down on High Bridge. The condominiums, I got a video that I want to show, but it may be copyrighted, so I'll go line on this one. But condominiums, series of houses get built. Condominiums is a form of ownership. It's not a building style. If you think, most times you think about condominiums, it started down in New York City. Well, here in New York State at least, it started in New York City. If you look at some of these pictures of the city of Syracuse back in the late 50s, early 60s, and you see this massive humanity walking up and down the streets and shopping and whatnot, that was the heyday for a lot of cities. The population started to disperse. They went to the suburbs. You had husband and wife now holding down a job. They were getting the cars. They could commute. And the cities were becoming ghost towns. So as an incentive to keep people there, New York State back in 1964 passed a condominium law which allowed people to go and buy the apartments that they were in. And this is why a lot of times people think condominiums are apartments. Well, they're not. Condominiums are, you own a share of the overall space. Here in Manlius and even here in Fayetteville, we have condominiums. And I can't go and assess these properties individually. I have to assess them as one entire economic unit. And then I have to use the income approach to value those properties. The income approach, if you stop and think about it for a moment, for residential properties could be a real bear. Crane Landing, down in Mallard's Landing, that's a condominium. And all of those houses have to be assessed as one complete economic unit, and then it gets allocated out to the individual houses. But the problem with that is if you go and build a $400,000 house, you don't build a $400,000 house for the purpose of renting it out. It gets rather excessive. I mean, you're spending $400,000 or $500,000. You want that house to be yours. But the real property tax law says I have to use the income approach to value those condominiums. And because of that, you wind up with information that, well, again, I'll try and show you a video here. It's about 4 minutes long, and it kind of highlights the problems with condominiums. Yes, sir. The first half going in are not. The back section, the back, yes, they are condominiums.
And so then they get that income. And to reiterate what you said is that it's what they would basically rent for is what their value is.
Right. And I can tell you, typically here in New York State, a condominium, the assessed value on a condominium will come in somewhere between 40 to 60% of the full market value. And it's a break. Go to Mallard's, you can have across the street to another neighbor, very identical houses or very comparable houses, and one's got half the taxes versus the other one who's paying full shot. Whole litany of exemptions that are out there: veterans exemption, seniors, STAR exemption, school tax relief, STAR, both the enhanced and the basic. We'll talk a little bit about it, and I'm going to pause for a question.
Are you going to get into each of these? Or I have a question about one of them.
Which one?
It's actually the veterans, and that has to be a veteran, so an active duty member doesn't get that for New York State, correct?
Incorrect.
It is incorrect.
As of last year, it's incorrect.
Okay, so it's new.
It's new. If you're on active duty for 10 years, come and see me.
I will, because when we moved here just a few years ago, I couldn't because I don't have a DD 214 because I'm still in.
You're still in?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines? Okay.
Can you tell us which ones we have to apply for every year and which ones you get once and they stay with you for a while?
Once a veteran, always a veteran. The seniors is based on income, and because the income can change from year to year, if all those trips down the road to Turning Stone, you finally hit it big, congratulations, but you'll price yourself out of the seniors exemption. So yes, you do have to go for the seniors exemption. The star exemption, the basic star, you apply for it once, and you're good to go. But the enhanced star, again, the enhanced star is income driven, and we'll touch on that a little bit, and I'll tell you why we're not going to go into details on it right now. Low-income disability, if you've got a disability and you're certified by Social Security and you're drawing SSDI, you can possibly qualify based on your income. Agricultural, typically agriculture is an exemption on the land, but if you build a new pole barn, for example, you can get a building ag exemption, which is 10% per year for 10 years. And after that time frame, then you're paying full shot on that barn. And that's the farm buildings. Got ahead of myself. Business exemptions, 485B. There's exemptions for nonprofits. Most nonprofit. Well, there's two types of nonprofits. There's permissible and mandatory. Town halls are mandatory. I have to go and exempt them. Whether and there is no application for. Well, you should reapply for it, so there's no change in the use of the property. But the law also says that if I know that this is still being used for village offices, and I don't get the exemption paperwork, I can just sign off on it. New within the last few years is the volunteer fire and ambulance exemption. That started off as an exemption, but then New York State changed it up a little bit and decided to give a credit on your tax returns, which was more favorable to the firefighters and the ambulance workers. Forest exemptions, again, we don't have to worry about that. Solar exemptions, that's out there. If you put solar panels on your roof, on your house, or solar farms, we've had a lot of fun with that, right, Sarah? And disabled low income, that goes back to a previous one, the low income disability. Okay, quick word about the star. And we're getting around the veterans. Basic star, all ages, resident owner, less than $500,000. Come in, apply for it, you got the basic star. The enhanced star, 65 years or older. Except for a spouse or a sibling. If your spouse or sibling are living in the house with you and they are not 65, you can still get the seniors exemption if you meet all the other requirements. And so in this particular case, it's less than $107,300 of all owners. Exemption versus credit. The exemption is going away. The assessors are being slowly but surely pushed out of the star business. New York State has taken over. Since March of 2016, yeah, don't quote me on 2016, I see you're writing. Pat Duffy said, New York State, if you come in and buy your house, you have to go and sign up for something called the IVP, the Income Verification Program, if you want the enhanced star. And that being the case, New York State will send you a check. Every September, just about the time your school taxes are due, they'll give you a credit. And we'll talk about the difference in income-wise, or the break-wise here. The exemption came directly off your school bill. Credit, they send you the check. And as I said, those exemptions are slowly but surely disappearing. When you apply for any exemption that requires a renewal, that deadline's coming up on Monday. Here's because we're talking about Fayetteville, we're talking about the FM school district, here's the differences in the income, or the differences in the break right now. If you've got the exemption, if you have the exemption, it's at a fixed amount and it's not going to change. If you go for the credit will change based on a state formula. Basically, there's a cost of living allowance every year that goes into it, so it continues to increase. The exemption, as I said, it's frozen. So if you got the enhanced star, you're at $1,600 right now, almost $1,700 exemption on the enhanced star. But if you signed up for the credit, and you can do that any time, or most every time, you can see the difference in the amount that comes into play here. Yes, sir.
Is the income that you're talking about from 2 years ago or last year?
2023, by law. It's got to be 2 years. If you do your taxes before April, after April 15th, then you can use last year's. But if your taxes are due on April 15th or before, you have to use 2 years before. So right now, we're taking 2023 income. Seniors exemption, FAGI, the federal adjusted gross income. If it's less than 58,400 on the 2023 tax returns, and you're 65 years or older before December 31st of this year, come see me before Monday or on Monday at the latest. It's got to be your primary residence, and the exemption is variable. Each level of government, the village, the town, the county, the school districts have a right to go and set the maximum limit in terms of what they allow for in income, and depending on what scale we're looking at, will determine whether you get an exemption anywhere between 5 to 50%, or no exemption at all. And did I mention the deadline is March 3rd? Pardon me? Yes, yes. Primary residence. Yeah, we're going to be asking for, if you're a first-time applicant, we're going to be asking you for your deed, your driver's license for proof of age. State Comptroller's Office does go around and they do audits, so we have to make sure all the paperwork is in order. Veterans exemption. Yeah, there's the alternative veterans exemption and the Cold War exemption. I'm not going to belabor the alternative to what. Well, yeah, it was eligible funds, which is an older solar exemption, or older exemption, no longer there, are almost gone totally. Cold War veterans, if you served during a time of Cold War, originally when this law was passed, it was only good for a 10-year period. It was supposed to sunset in 10 years. Legislature came back and said, no, we're just going to go and extend it. So even if you just served during a time of, not a time of war, I'm a Cold War veteran. So, but you get 15% for serving during a period of conflict. You get another 10% if you actually were in the theater of operation. And if you have a VA certified disability, you get 50% of that exemption. And as I said, as of last year, if you're on active duty, you can come in and see me. Right now, a few years ago, the state passed a law that allowed the school districts to offer the VA exemption or the veterans exemption, but none of the school districts here in that overlap the town have adopted it. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a reason why? Because schools get additional money funded from the government for every single one of our children. So that's double dipping. Would it not be?
You'll have to talk to the school board. That's a political decision I'm not in. Yeah. Yeah, they've talked about it, I can tell you that. But as I said, it's I'm a veteran too. Did I mention the deadline's coming up on Monday, March 3rd? As I mentioned before, the tentative roll comes out on May 1st of each year. It's subject to change by the Board of Assessment Review. It used to be that once that tentative roll came out, I was not allowed to go and make any changes to it. Probably about 15 years ago, they changed the law that said, hey, Pat Duffy's of the world, if you want to go and sit down with the property owner and agree that your information was wrong and it warrants a reduction, I can sign off on a stipulation and you're done. You don't have to go to grievance day. That's a great tool, trust me. Board of Assessment Review. They meet on the 4th Tuesday in May. If you want to grieve, you have to have the grievance form in on the 4th Tuesday in May. If you come in on the 4th Wednesday in May, you're a day late and $1 short. You'll be the first one in line for next year. We currently have a 3-person board. Sarah can talk to 5 persons and whether you want to go in that direction or not. The Board of Assessment Review, they select the chairperson. I should change that chairman. They must be a resident of the municipality, and they are on a 5-year term. Whether it's a 3-person board or a 5-person board, they all get 5 years. The law says they have to have a working knowledge of the local market. I'm not sure how you go about measuring that. They set the time, not the date, but they set the time and the place for hearing the grievances. And by law, the assessor must attend all the grievance day hearings. So what the board can do, the bar can go and leave the assessment alone. You come in, you grieve it, and they say, we don't agree with you, they leave it alone. They can reduce it down to what the property owner is asking for. Typically, it's line 7 on the grievance form that's on the bottom of the first page. You can say this is what you think it's worth, and then be sure you document it. Or they can go and not take it all the way down. They can take it someplace in between, and it's up to the board's discretion as to where they want to put that assessment. Or they can take it off and strike it from the roll altogether. That means that you had one big parcel, it got split, and one of the parcels no longer, I'm sorry, it got merged, and one of the parcels no longer exists. So what was where you got 2 tax parcels, 2 tax bills, 2 assessments, now it's all merged, and if you got the bill for 2 parcels, you say, no, sorry, you got to take it off the roll. It's just 1 parcel. Very, very rare. They used to be able to raise the assessments if you came in and grieved it. Now you're safe. It's nothing ventured, nothing gained. If you feel that your assessment's out of kilter, by all means, come on in. They cannot lower the assessment anything lower than what you ask. So if they come in and they say, yeah, okay, it should have been something lower, but the board that we have is very good. I've got a lot of respect for them. They will go and allow the property owner to go and make changes to the form if they're right there. If they're looking at this and say, for example, they do a mathematical error in their own calculations, and they look at it, the board will slide the paper back and they can go and change it and just initial it. Reasons for agreement, it's unequal. I'm assessing your house at 50% of the value, and I'm assessing your house at 70% of the value. That's unequal. It doesn't apply here in Manlius. A lot of people will come in and say it's unequal. It's only for those towns that are at fractional assessment. But again, almost without fail, everyone checks off excessive and unequal. But it's not unequal. If you read the form, you'll see what I'm talking about there. Illegal. Illegal is the parcel that you get the tax bill from is not in the town of Manlius, or the assessment was put on the roll by someone other than the assessor. And that's probably it for that. Misclassification is for homestead. Homestead is if the municipality adopts a Homestead Act, which allows them to go and assess commercial properties at a higher percentage of value than the residential properties. I think in my lifetime I've only seen one municipality do it, and that was the city of Binghamton. And I was working on a reval project down there in the early 90s, and they passed the homestead. And what they didn't take into consideration was they were only about 15 miles away from the Pennsylvania border. And what happened was a lot of those commercial properties got up and either A, moved out to the suburbs, or they went just a little bit further and went over to Pennsylvania. My wife and I took a drive through Binghamton about a year afterwards. It was a ghost town. It was drive through the commercial sector, and plywood was up all over the place. What you cannot grieve. You cannot grieve your taxes. And you cannot grieve your taxes. And you cannot grieve your taxes. You're grieving your assessment. You know, the taxes, and we'll talk about this very shortly here, the taxes are, it's a combination of both the assessed values and the taxable values, or the budget, rather. The final roll is published on July 1st, usually, and it's subject to judicial review, small claims assessment review. If you have a house, you can go to a SCAR hearing. If you have a vacant lot, that's not big enough based on local code to build on, you can take that to SCAR. Everyone else has to go to an Article 7. They have to go to a certiorari in the state Supreme Court. The difference being in the certiorari, it's about a $350 filing fee, and the SCAR hearing is about $35. And if you go to SCAR and you win, you get more than 50% of the difference between what the assessor says and what the property owner says. You get your $35 back. Anything less than that, if you only get 75% difference, then it's at the discretion of the SCAR hearing officer. Basically, it's arbitration. Yeah, I'm not going to belabor this. I just got ahead of myself. Yeah, so here's the thing when we were talking about earlier. We're talking about the just because the assessments go up doesn't mean the taxes are going up. Here's an example of where the taxable values stayed relatively the same, but the budget changed. So one year you had a budget of $100,000, and I know this is all simple math, but you had a simple budget of $100,000. You had an assessed value of a taxable assessed value of $1 million. That comes out to a tax rate of $100 per thousand. If the following year the budget goes up to $120,000 and the assessments stay the same, then the tax rate will change. It goes up to $120 per thousand. Yes.
So your house could stay the same, except because the municipality you live in, their budget's gone up, you're gonna pay more taxes.
Not necessarily. You live in a neighborhood that went up by 3% and another neighborhood went up by 6%. Someone's going to take more of the tax hit than you will. In fact, depending on how the shift works out, you can actually see your assessment increase, but see your taxes go down. It depends on how much of a shift there is.
I'm saying that the budget of the municipality you live in does affect what you're gonna pay.
Yes. Bottom line, yes. Here's an example. The budget stays the same from one year to the next. And you go from an assessed value of $1 million up to $4 million. This is a town that hadn't done a reassessment for years and years and years, and finally one year they woke up and decided to do a reassessment, and the value went up to $4 million. So now you see the tax rate changes from $100 per thousand, it goes down to $25 per thousand. That's if the assessments change and the budget stayed the same. Hopefully, I think I just answered someone's question on this. This is another question that came into play. The equalization rate. We jumped through a lot of hoops with New York State to stay at 100%. And New York State has a standard that if we get within plus or minus 5% of the 100%, they will certify us at 100%. What they wind up doing, if you're in a municipality where you're not at 100%, what they wind up doing is they take the assessor's assessed value and divide it by their value. They will go and send people out from the office, and they will come. They used to come to my office. Now it's all online. They get this information, and they go out and do appraisals on different types of properties, different classes. They stratify it. So it's not, so it's more homogeneous rather than all lump-sided. But then they compare their value to my value, and that's what drives the train in terms of the state equalization rate. But as I said, here we're at 100% certified, plus or minus. Public relations, well, here I am. For publics, general public, taxpayers, in this case, your general public and taxpayers, and government officials, Sarah, Mike, Mark, media. For some reason, I wind up getting a lot of phone calls. Yeah, I get a lot of phone calls from reporters from Post Standard and from the TV stations, and they tend to set up their cameras a lot in my office for some reason. I have there's a gentleman that works in this, who lives in this town, who used to work for Channel 9, and he says the reason they keep coming to you is you're willing to go and talk to them. Well, I have one of two choices. I can sit back and watch a reporter try to tell the story and be accurate about it, or I can draw the fly into the web and make sure they tell it right. Self-explanatory. I will tell you on availability, the closer we get to grievance day, the harder it is to get into me. It's just everyone waits until the 11th hour, and there's not enough time, there's not enough hours in the day, and not enough days in the week to deal with everything that needs to be dealt with. Now would be a good time, by the way. It's busy, but it's a good time. And again, use the media. It's good public relations. Wrapping it up, we're in the home stretch. These are some resources that you can go online and check on. I talked about the OnGov, the Onondaga County, and ImageMade Online. Very good resource for information. And last but not least, everyone's awake too. This is amazing. Yes, sir.
So I've watched your presentation. If you had to give yourself a grade on how accurate your assessments are, what grade would you give yourself?
A minus.
Well, I disagree with you. To me, this should be a transparent process. When I watch the way you've developed your assessments, it's not transparent. You even said during your presentation, it's an art and it's a science.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I bought my home 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago. My assessment's doubled. I've put a new roof on. I patched the holes in the side of my house. I painted my house. I got a permit to redo a bathroom. I mean, I'm just wondering if your office, you know, as a homeowner, a family man, I have 3 daughters. How can I budget if I don't know what I'm budgeting for? And I know what you do has nothing to do with my taxes. I got that point. But yes, it does.
Indirectly, it does.
So I'm just wondering, I mean, shouldn't a homeowner, say with market values, especially if Micron comes, say a home is assessed for 300 and I pay 400, shouldn't I be able to kind of assess myself transparently where my taxes are going to go?
If you're talking taxes,
how can we solve that?
I believe Mike mentioned you've got budget hearings coming up in March.
My question was specifically regarding the assessment.
Assessments. I know this is going to sound.
What can we do to make this process more transparent?
You can have the assessor come out and talk. You can come in and talk to the assessor. We can go. It's an open door policy. It really is.
I visited your office.
Pardon me?
I have visited your office.
Okay. Have you come into my office?
I get as far as the window. And again, it was the formula I was presented with how this is this is complicated stuff, you know.
It is.
I'm a pretty smart guy.
Okay. I have no reason to doubt you on that, but I'm also a very smart guy. What do you do for a living?
You told me that.
What do you do for a living?
How is that relevant? I used to be a nuclear power plant operator.
Ever think of becoming a nuclear power operator?
And I would never think of becoming an assessor.
So there's the point. You know, it's not that I'm not trying to be transparent. You know, if I was trying to be opaque about things, I wouldn't be standing here taking the questions and presenting the information. If you have questions after this, by all means.
I just have a concern for my community. I mean, a guy like me who wants to better his home for his family and his community is then punished by paying more in taxes. And if that's the burden I want to bear, I just want to know what that is. So it needs to be a transparent process.
Yeah.
And this isn't. By your own admission.
No, I didn't admit that it's not a transparent.
You didn't say it was an art and a science?
Pardon me?
You did not say during your presentation it was an art and a science.
Yes, I did. It's a science in terms of collecting up the data and doing the analysis and working toward that pinnacle, but you will never get to the pinnacle. That's where art has to come into play, and that's based on 35 years of experience. I take a guy or a gal who comes to work at a nuclear power plant. Would you go and trust them and say, watch the controls here while I go and get my lunch?
If that person is qualified to perform the role, then yeah.
If they're
If
qualified.
they're not qualified, then no.
Yeah, if they're qualified. Trust me, I'm qualified. Not to be arrogant, not to be egotistical about it, but I'm qualified.
I just want to know what you know. I want to know how these numbers come about. That's my point. I just wish it was more transparent.
That's exactly my opinion as well. That's exactly, he said what I feel exactly the same. That I looked at properties in my neighborhood and what they sold for, and I could look at the comps on the, the pictures of the houses and everything. And I go, when you say full market value, then here's the houses that are selling in my neighborhood and they're comparable. That seems pretty straightforward. You gave a lot of, what about this, what about that, what about the other thing? And I think what he's saying and what I'm saying is that there should be a much more transparent way for people to see what their house is valued at and be confident that that is an accurate value.
Again, open door. Give me a call. We can talk.
Can you just explain, because I had it explained to me one time when I did go to grievance day, about the fact that you see in the newspaper perhaps that a house sold for $200,000 and you look at their assessment after the next year, and of course you're saying it's kind of a year delay because of what you explained about why that house isn't reassessed immediately for that selling price. Maybe you answered that before, but could you just clarify that again for people that
again,
look at stuff more closely and regularly?
Yeah, again, first off, we're looking at sales up to July 1st of last year. So if you're looking at a sale that takes place tomorrow, you see it in Sunday's paper, and then you go and look at the tentative roll that comes out on July 1st, you most likely will not see the new assessment matching the sale price. Because again, it's welcome stranger, it's an illegal way in which to go and do the assessments. When I first got here, let's just say I had my strong suspicions about my predecessor doing welcome stranger. And you can look at it, take a look at the roll and say, okay, so here's all the assessed values, here's the sale price. And next thing you know is the assessment went up there. But when you saw the sale price here, and the assessment was down here, you never saw that assessment come down. It was just like there was this motivation to kind of keep things on the high side. I said my predecessor, he was very good at what he did, but again, not everyone's going to agree with me. I'm not going to go and agree with everyone else. I have my disagreements with my contemporaries, and they have the same with me. But I feel confident as where I am. But again, if you really don't think that you're getting any satisfaction, if you think that your assessment doesn't match the market conditions in your neighborhood, go to grievance day. See me first. Here's the avenues of appeal that you have open to you. Number one is talk to the assessor. You're paying for my salary. You might as well get your money's worth out of it. Second is go to the Board of Assessment Review. If you don't agree with me, if we don't come to an agreement on it, I may agree with you that it may have to go down. But if you don't think that's enough, you can take it a step further, go down even further, take it to the Board of Assessment Review. If the Board of Assessment Review tells me to reduce it, I have to reduce it. I can't go and appeal that. The next step is you can go to that SCAR hearing. You can go to that Small Claims Assessment Review. And again, SCAR hearing officer says, Duffy, reduce the assessment. I have to reduce the assessment. There is no appeal. All of the appeals are stacked in the favor of the property owner. Take advantage of it.
Yeah,
was wondering if you could go into the full assessed value versus the, versus not full assessed value. And why, I mean, because I look at Village of Skinny Atlas. Yeah, and, you know, they have houses that are not assessed at their full value, but they've, you know, it's been the same owner for 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I can tell you, a big problem for Skinny Atlas is the waterfront properties in particular. And there's an old saying that God's not making any more of it. Well, unless you're in Kentucky, and then different story. But seriously, the waterfront properties are a premium down there. I can also tell you right now that the town of Skinny Atlas is going through a reassessment, a full-fledged top to bottom reassessment of all the properties down there. I'm not sure if they're going to be ready this year or if it's going to be next year, but I do know they're already in the process of going in that direction. City of Syracuse, same story there. City of Syracuse is, I worked on the reval back in the 90s in the city of Syracuse, and everything was at 100%. And it made it a whole lot easier for property owners to compare themselves to their neighbors. But over time, things have slipped down. And this goes back to that one slide I was showing you of the 4 different neighborhoods, where if you put your trust in the equalization rate, some are going to get screwed over and some are just going to ride the gravy train.
I guess I just didn't follow that. Maybe I'm just not understanding.
Yeah.
As far as the neighborhoods go and how that actually influences, again, I need some further guidance. I'll stop down here.
There you go. Come on down.
I just want to make a comment. What do you do, push this? It's on? Okay. I just want to make a comment. We've lived here over 30 years, and as long as we have this school district, people want to live here. And there are little things that occur with houses, and just having lived here this long and knowing a lot of people have moved in and out. Like, for example, our house, the kids can walk to school, walk to the post office, walk to a lot of places. So our house might be more valuable than houses a few blocks down where the kids have to get bused. And there's just little things like that that happen when houses are sold. And I also understand that the budget in the village and the budget in the town affects our taxes. And that has nothing to do with our assessment in a lot of ways. So that's another, you know, the gentleman had already left, but I wanted to say to him too, keep track of the village budget. Keep track of the town budget. That's going to affect your taxes maybe more than the assessment on your house. And if you've done improvements to your house and you've gotten permits for it, then they know your house is worth more. So.
Yeah, and I think one way to go and take a look at, and I hate talking taxes. Again, I subscribe to not being a tax assessor, but sometimes I just get drawn into the conversation. This year, you have a small pizza. And it's going to cost X amount of dollars to run it. You want to put the trucks on the highway to go and plow it and pave it and everything else. Because the cost of fuel is going up to run those trucks. The cost to go and pave a road has gone up. You now, instead of having a small pizza, you need to go to a bigger pizza. And the year after, you go to a large pizza. My job isn't to go and determine what I'm going to get. My job is to go and this is what the assessments do, is they allocate how big of a slice you're going to get. So the budget is what the budget is. And that's where I would strongly encourage you, make yourself available at the budget hearings. Yes, sir.
I kind of take interest in hearing the different things you're saying. And a couple of things come to mind. Your source of information, you talked about, well, if you happen to talk to the neighbors and find out they got a nice finished basement, or you notice there's a pool, which everything I've ever learned about real property value, a pool in central New York may or may not be a benefit in selling it. Because to one buyer, they got to say, how much does it cost to fill that thing and give it up? and they're going to pay less. Somebody else says, well, I guess I'll take it, I'll want it, and I'll pay a little more, which gets into this real property values, as you know, are not an exact science, because somebody can come here from California and say, wow, I can buy that house for $350,000, no problem. So they buy a house for $350 in a neighborhood that's $280, because they know in California that's what they would have paid, or it's a buy here. And for you to go and use that $350, it's inaccurate, because somebody made a mistake, just like on another house somebody might sell it for $180 when it's worth $250. So it's an inexact science. The other thing, I've worked my own business for 50 years in this community, and my customer base are homeowners almost totally. I worked in lots and lots of houses in Fayetteville, Manlius area for that 50 years. And rest assured, there's a lot of differences in those houses. The way people use them, the way they decorate them, the way they furnish them, the way they take care of them, because I'm part of that. And so there's a big difference. Another thing, so many times I get in a job and I say to somebody, why didn't you get that remodeler to get the wiring inspected? Or vice versa, I'm in a house, well, the plumbing work I'm going to get a permit and get it inspected. And the majority of people feel that inspector is the assessor. And you just admitted that the inspector is you, that you're going to use that, which puts me in a really dangerous position. Do I get my work inspected and certified so I'm covered and they're covered? Or do I go along with their request, don't get it inspected, and 5 years later the house burns down because they didn't want the assessor to be in the loop? So I think you ought to be a little more careful how and where you grab that information, but in a public safety thing, if you could openly say, we will not use building permits as an assessment tool because it causes people not to get things inspected and done safely, and there's remodelers all the time doing wrong work.
Yeah, and I get it. I do. Seriously.
Do you care about the safety?
Yeah, and in fact, I'll tell you right here, right now, there was a house here on East Genesee Street. Property owner came in and was complaining. They had bought this house. They were complaining about headaches. And they were also talking about the furnace that they had to keep on going down and kicking to get it to work. And one thing led to another. I talked to Mike Jones, the code enforcement officer, and come to find out, Mike was invited in to go and do an inspection, and Mike found a gaping hole in the vent to the outside. Mike, to his credit, stepped up and offered different programs that would help the property owner out. So that really does work in the favor of the property owner too. Does it work against them at times? Yeah, it does. I'll put that up there.
Yeah, well,
but in the overall scheme of things, all I can do is the best I can do. And is it perfect? No. That's why I'm not giving myself an A or an A+. There is always room for improvement. But as I said, I can stack up my office against any other office here, and I'm damn proud of it.
well, last month I replaced 2 furnaces that NIMO came out and locked out. I mean, shut off and locked it off. And those are ones I picked up on.
Welcome to my world. I had mine
But
just
the
replaced
point is,
last month.
I'm not going to go and report to you, by the way, I put new furnaces in these 2 houses, because if you're going to use that to raise the assessment, I don't want you to know that.
No.
Yes, you are. You're saying a permit would cause you to go and look.
No. Not
I
all.
think what he said was, and I don't mean to speak for you, but if you're getting a permit for a normal repair or replacement, that's one thing. You're getting a permit to put in a new bathroom or to add make a half bathroom a full bathroom or do something else. That's where he would utilize that information to consider the increased value of your house. Every house has to have a furnace. He's not going to raise the assessment because you got a brand new furnace or a brand new hot water heater.
Correct.
So I'm just saying, that's how it is, Malcolm. You know, you can ask him, you can go talk to him.
Refrain from trying to protect and do some political action.
I am not trying to protect anyone. I am trying to tell you. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Malcolm. That's great.
Electric system
Are there any other questions for the assessor, please?
And I get permitted to get the electric service for you. It's none of your business to raise the assessment, because I put a better electric.
All right, let me throw a scenario at you. Go up north, and you have a very strong, very large Amish population. No electricity. They put one of the houses up for sale, you go in and buy it. Are you going to pay more or less than the market value because it doesn't have electricity? You're going to what?
If it's an Amish, if I'm an Amish person, I'll buy it without the word, that's what I want.
Right. But if you're not Amish, you're going to buy the house, you're going to have to take into consideration the cost of retrofitting that house with electricity. So you've got one of two things. You can tell the seller, you put the electrical in, and I'll pay your asking price, or bring your asking price down that's going to be commensurate with the cost to cure. In other words, I'm going to have to buy the house, and I'm going to invest $40,000 into the electrical.
Okay, well,
If you go in and you put in a new electrical system into a house, does that house have more or less value because you did that?
Hopefully it has more value.
There you go.
okay. Okay, well, thank you. Let's not end the night in an argument.
The house then has more value.
All right, please, can I just have... I should have brought my gavel. I want to thank Patrick Duffy for being here from the town assessor's office and the town assessor to explain the process to us. I appreciate everyone coming out this evening. I appreciate everyone that is going to be able to watch this online to see and get this information. It was an idea that we had to invite the assessor here to explain the process to the people. We're not here to defend him or to not defend him. He was here to explain the situation to him, to the village residents, to the town residents, to whoever wants to watch this, about how the assessment process works. And we thank you for your time and your energy to be here.
And I got thick skin, too. So.